So thanks for having me. I'm a communication designer, and this presentation is part of my master thesis in inclusive design. My supervisors for this project was Dr. Peter Coppin and Richard Hunt. The title of my presentation, with a little alteration from the abstract, is Quantifying the Ambiguity of the Semi-Conconantial Persian Writing System and its Consequences. In this presentation, first, I will introduce the issues of the absence of short vowel in the representation and the structure of words in Persian orthography and its consequences. Then I will demonstrate an analytical tool to measure the shortcoming and visualize the long vowels inconsistency. First, I have to give you a little background about the status of Persian writing and orthography. As many of you know, the written form of Persian language is the Arabic script with some adjustments. The introduction of Arabic script to the Persian language is going back to the mid-7th century and the Muslim conquest of Persia. The Perso-Arabic alphabet is semi-consonantal script system. Semi-consonantal may be an unconventional term to name the Perso-Arabic for some people, as they prefer abjad. But it oversimplifies the complexity of Perso-Arabic if we say, in abjad, the characters denote consonants only, and it disregards aleph as vowel in both Arabic and Persian, and the appearance of the matres lectionis. I will return to these 2 points shortly. Scholars have criticized the Arabic script's insufficiency or shortcoming for the Persian orthography more or less for the last millennia. However, this criticism intensified in the last 150 years in favor of modern modification, reform, or alteration of the Persian script. The idea of reform and changing the script comes from a variety of sources, most notably readability and legibility issues, pan-Iranism worldview, and favoring Western modernity. This political and nationalism worldview are not the subject of this presentation. So let's look at some of these technical issues. The homogeneous gâafematik structure or base, which distinguish graphemes by dots, is a source of legibility difficulty in many cases, which could be minimized by typographical treatments. The absence of vowel graphemes, especially short vowels, cause readability difficulties. In the Perso-Arabic, aleph play the long vowel, and short vowel roll, and ye, vav, and sometimes he are the matres lectionis. Many people, including one reviewer of my abstract, comment about the availability of harakat in the Perso-Arabic writing. Harakat are indicator marks representing a variety of phonetic requirements, including short vowels. Although it's correct about the existence of harakat, there are a few points I want to mention about the reality and the nature of this diacritics. One, Iranian educational system uses these marks as supportive learning tools. And the starting grade 2 encourages students to write without these marks. As a result, using harakat in writing are considered childish and uneducated. The Academy of Persian Language and Literature, the official regulatory body and authority on Persian language, orthography, word formation, and literature, suggests avoiding harakat unless compelling cases and unfamiliar words. Here is a page from the Persian Writing Guideline, a guide prepared and published by the Academy of Persian Language as an official document on proper writing in Persian. The absence of these diacritical marks on this page is clear. This approach is pointing us to a bigger problem, which is the agency of readers. We forget about the end users and readers' agency by saying harakat are available for unfamiliar words in Persian orthography. In a very simplified definition, most written pieces have at least two ends, the writer and the reader. In this case, we give the writer the structure of the structure to decide which word or composition is more critical or harder to read, not the reader, though harder have readers have different sets of unfamiliar or hard to read words. Unlike many Roman-based scripts, that diacritical marks alter the sound characteristic of a letter. In Persian and Arabic, harakat are representing sound after a particular letter. Indeed, they are the omitted phonemes through the writing process, and we cannot merely call them accents. Aleph is an exception here, which could accept diacritics as accents. In Persian orthography, short vowels are usually considered as a secondary or less important phonetical part of a word structure due to their absence in writing. But why are words representation important independently from their semantic context? This analytical process focuses on the ambiguity inherent in the script at the words level. The absence of short vowels in Persian script is a particularly significant issue in the modern world of telegraphic, sometimes word-length communication, such as texting and wayfinding environment. In these situations, a word or a short phrase represents a large body of information, and there is no further supporting information that can provide morphological clues that would reduce confusion or uncertainty. Finally, this process is necessarily designed for a particular group of measurements and not intended as complete analysis of how successfully or unsuccessfully Persian script represents the language. The absence of short vowels and matris lectionis in Persian orthography introduces challenges when using search engines, databases, and contributes to ambiguity during transliteration from and to Persian. Speaking of search engines, speaking of search engines and databases leads us to another topic, which is the variety of sources and standards for romanization of the Persian. The lack of sole source for the romanization version of the Persian and vice versa could create two issues: inconsistency between databases and sources, and increasing the difficulty of reproducing the original word after transliteration process. Standards like American Library Association, Library of Congress, Deutsches Institutes for Normung, United Nations group of experts on geographical names, and others took two different approaches for romanization of Persian to distinguish between phonemes that are not directly part of English alphabet set, either using diacritical marks or pairing letters to make digraphs. These solutions are not necessarily aligned with the unofficial regular practices and use. Usually the regular users of the Persian use the 26 letters of the English alphabet to reproduce the romanized version of their search or communication. Therefore, they usually use digraphs or single grapheme close to their needs. This practice does not follow the guide of some standards with diacritical marks, nor does necessarily match with the other guides that offer digraphs. Not all standardized suggestions are easily accessible through regular QWERTY keyboards. And most importantly, because romanizing Persian and transliterating non-Persian words into Perso-Arabic script is not part of the educational system, there might be more than a version for a word. I give you some examples shortly. The condition is like removing a few vowel graphemes from an alphabetical writing system and keeping them for unique cases, which increases the uncertainty about the meaning of words. And this can be quantified. I will do same thought experiment in English to illustrate the situation and then demonstrate the case in Persian orthography and its consequences. It does not mean that I'm not aware of the obvious differences between the English and the Persian orthography, but English is a language that everyone knows well here, I believe, therefore easier to demonstrate the logic of my process. If we assume all phones are in two categories of consonant and vowel and overlook phones like semi-vowels, we can decompose all words in consonants and vowel patterns. I examine words in two steps, single vowels and single vowels plus digraphs, by removing all vowels A, E, I, O, U, and Y from a word, only consonants remain, and then to enumerate the number of possible word formation by misplacing and adding vowels in between the remaining consonants. In step one, I'm using only single vowel graphemes A, E, I, O, U, and Y when it functions as vowel, not consonant, and avoid vowel digraphs such as OA and OU. Then in step two, I introduce vowel digraphs representing either a monophthong or a diphthong into the process. Here I will use the simple word bat and former for the experiment. Bat is a word composed of three graphemes, B, A, and T. By removing A from the word, we have this structure, B and T. As shown in this chart, here I try to construct all possible compositions by adding any of six vowels I just mentioned, any of these six vowels I just mentioned, or skipping to add any letter, possibly having a consonant cluster in the middle of some words, or having consonant digraph. Therefore, there will be not any vowel at the beginning of these compositions. This experiment gives us 7 power of 2, a total of 49 possible word formation with the B plus T letters, in which there are at least 8 meaningful words. I'm repeating the same procedure for the word former. The remaining consonants of the word are F, R, M, and R. The number of possible word combination is 7 power of 4, a total of 2,401. It gives us 4 meaningful compositions. For step 2, I'm adding vowel digraphs along with single grapheme. If we consider the following digraphs list, we have 19 more vowels plus the previous 6 single vowel grapheme and consonant cluster. We have a total of 26 possible choices. As a result, the updated combination possibilities for the BT example, when we add either a single grapheme or a digraph only after each consonant grapheme and not before, will be 26 power of 2, a total of 676. And with the same criteria, we will have 26 power of 4 possible formation for the FRMR example, a total of 456,976. In the case of Persian, the situation is different from the case I just visualized. Therefore, the process will be different too. First, I will explain the role of unrepresented short vowels phonemes, and then long vowels. There are 3 recognized short vowels for the Persian language, zebar, zir, and pish, that sound a, and o. They called fateh, kasra, and dammeh in Arabic. The other related auxiliary sign is sukun, which supposedly indicate the consonant without a following vowel. This sign is important to distinguish between letters vav, he, and ye as consonants or as vowels. Sukun is another overlooked sign in Persian orthography. Letter vav, he, and ye are matrixlexionist in Persian. This chart shows how they sound. And letter aleph is always a vowel letter, a standalone long vowel, or an auxiliary letter to form digraphs. I am using an example to demonstrate a real-life situation. The Persian word bag meaning leaf, has a CVCZ structure. A grade 1 student should write this word as B plus zabar plus re plus sukun plus qaf. And it looks like this in Persian. However, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, it would be very unlikely to see the word with harakat in non-educational context. So here is the regular appearance of the word. In this case, we have three consonants without any vowel indicator. I do not place any vowel before consonants and at the end of the word for the experiment. Here is the example. Here in this example, there are only two places to put vowels, after B and after Re. Referring to the three short vowels that I mentioned earlier, we potentially use either of those phonemes or choose not to use any vowel after each consonant. In total, we have four possibilities. 4 power of 2 possible formation in the back example for a total of 16. This example is a known word and hard to get confused, but there is always a chance to face a word that is not very familiar. Having more consonants increases the probability of forming and pronouncing a composition of consonant and become harder to distinguish between consonant compounds or adding vowels. In the B power of n, the B or base is a number of variable vowels and consonant cluster, here is 4, and the exponent or n is the number of locations we have in any given consonant composition. So if we have 5 letters, the probability will be 4 power of 4, a total of 256. Having letters vav and ye in any word and he at the end of words change the dynamic of words. As mentioned earlier, these letters can function as both consonant and vowel. They could function as monophthong or diphthong and appear alone or form a digraph. Adding aleph increases the variety of those components. I will explain these letters individually. Recall this chart showed earlier. It shows the phone that these letters represent in both consonant and vowel cases. Letter vav in the first row sound v as consonant and o or u as vowel. Letter ye in the second row sounds ye as consonant and e as vowel. And finally, letter he sounds he as consonant and a or a only if it sits at the end of words. These three could join together or aleph and create more variety of sounds. Aleph itself sounds a and can represent a, and o. For the o, it could be single grapheme or aleph plus vav digraph. Aleph plus vav also could sound u or o. Aleph plus ye could be a V plus C component or a digraph long vowel E. Using single graphemes or forming a digraph depends on the location of the phone in words. As mentioned, all aleph, vav, and he and ye could come as pairs. The following chart shows the possible pairings. When we are facing such a combination, other than the 4 possibilities we have previously, we should add more varieties. 1, a digraph that sounds either monophthong or digraph. 2, 2 single graphs that are paired as CV, VC, or CC. So I talked a little about unrepresented short and uncertainty of long vowels in Persian and single graphs and digraphs, and how the situation become more complicated when there are pairs of aleph, vav, he, and ye. What are the consequences of these points or on transliteration, search engines, and databases? Although the frequency is not so often, but in Persian, there are some words with a similar written form, while they have a different phonetic structure. And these differences are not presented because of the unrepresented short vowels. This word could be pronounced in two different ways with two distinct meanings. The short vowel in kaf plus a short vowel plus shin plus te plus ye could be either zabar or pish and makes the word kashti or kushti. The first one means sheep and the second one wrestling. Remember the long list of graphs and digraphs in both Persian and language. It shows the possibility of choosing multiple options for one phoneme due to inconsistency between transliteration standards. Obviously, transliteration is not limited only between Persian and English. When there is a vowel phoneme in a Persian word, we should find the proper correspondence transliterated equivalent. As a result, there is a high chance of having multiple versions of single word after transliteration. It happens from both sides, Persian to non-Persian and vice versa. In the following example, letter vav in the word guyesh, meaning dialect, would appear at least in three formats: O plus O, O plus U, and U. Sorry, O plus U and U. It sounds U. Reproducing a word to the original language after the transliteration process from Persian and to the Persian is not an easy task always. A word from another language will experience some changes during the transliteration process, and most significantly, losing many short vowels in the Persian written form. Transitioning back to the original word for more in-depth research on the topic is a challenging task. I should mention that sometimes we can find multiple formats of the same word or phrase. Obviously, using harakat by authors would help to reduce the confusion, but only if the author decides to use these signs. In this study, I tried to illustrate and demonstrate one of the existing shortcomings of the Persian writing system, which is an incomplete required set of vowel graphemes for representing phoneme of the Persian language. Lack of universally accepted transliteration and romanization guideline or standard is another difficulty that the Persian language is facing. The existence of such a guideline would be beneficial for the academic community and helps a speaker of various Persian languages regardless of the script they are using. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaveh, for your talk. I had a question.
Sure.
So the non-existence of not writing short vowels is a common phenomenon in Arabic alphabet languages. Could you compare the situation of Persian with those of other languages? So, for example, we know that Arabic is a Semitic language, while Persian is an Indo-European one. Does this mean that the absence of explicit short vowels has more negative effects, or how could you compare Persian to other Arabic alphabet languages?
So about if we want to compare these two languages or cases, we have to consider that we have a huge number of loan words from Arabic into Persian language, and it makes the situation even more interesting because on one hand we have Persian words that require these short vowels, and on the other hand there are the Arabic words that again they require this harakat or accents, if you want to call that way. And also some words from French or English and other sources in the language. I don't have any number in front of me to compare which language has more short vowels or vowels in general, but something is clear is that in most cases I saw in Arabic, they use more of these harakats like shidda, sukun, or tanween. But in Persian language, we really barely see any of those signs. And also we have different sets of letters, for example, Sad or Sin, which has different pronunciation in Arabic, but usually in Persian, not all dialect of Persian, but in many dialect of Persian, there are just sounds like S or Sin or Se. So these points are making transliteration or pronunciation or even orthography a little more complex than in Arabic when they pronounce differently.
You mentioned tanween and shadda. These are used for nunation and gemination, but you don't have these phenomena in Persian, do you?
We have, but we barely use.
Okay.
First of all, we use many Arabic words that they come with tanween and shidda, which we have to use, but we usually don't. And also some Persian words have the same situation we don't use as well.
And a question by Kevin Donnelly.
Oh, hello. Yes, I just wanted to ask, what you're saying in effect is that there are no official guidelines at all from, say, the Iranian government or anything, the same way Korean has official Hangul romanization and China has official pinyin romanization. There's nothing been done like that for...
So I didn't say there is no guideline. There are some guidelines, including one guideline Iranian government proposed to UN for romanization of geographical locations. But the point is that it's really different than what people usually use. And also in that guideline, they use some letters like X for Khe, which it's really hard to see in regular communication that people use. And also the other problem is that even Iranian media and official documents are not following the same guideline for other usages. For example, recently I was looking at some stats about the COVID, and it's funny because COVID comes from coronavirus disease. So the first CO is represented on both, but on COVID, we represent O with Vav, while we are not representing O with Vav in Corona. So we have two different writing for the same setup or for the same composition.
Okay. So there's a lot to be done yet.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
In your master thesis, you mentioned that there have been some Romanization proposals, and I would like to know what the current situation is, because I can hardly imagine an Islamic republic going away from the Arabic alphabet.
So transitioning from Arabic alphabet, as I mentioned, has a long conversation and it's long debate in Iranian and Persian speaking communities. Obviously, Islamic government or the Iranian government has no intent to even move forward that direction. And there are many reasons we can understand, and I can mention if you want as well. But something that I really like to say is that an educational romanized version for scientific purposes. So if I write or if I search for something in Persian or in English, it should be easily transferred to the other language for the scientific purposes. The point is not we should move towards Roman alphabet or not. That's another discussion, but we have to have a guideline, at least for documenting and other purposes.
Okay, thank you very much, Kaveh.
Thank you.